Finn's footsteps echoed through the sterile corridors of Los Angeles Memorial Hospital as he replayed the details of Liam's miraculous recovery in his mind. Only hours earlier, Liam had awoken from a high-risk cardiac procedure, an unprecedented surgery allegedly performed by Dr. Grace Buckingham that had defied every medical expectation and promised a swift return to health. The nurses spoke of a medical marvel, and cameras had even captured Grace smiling as reporters clamored for details. Curiosity had gnawed at Finn all afternoon, until he finally slipped into Grace's private office under the guise of discussing post-operative care. There, buried beneath stacks of patient charts and glossy promotional brochures for Grace's clinic, he found something impossible: no surgical notes, no signed consent forms, and no detailed records of the landmark operation she'd advertised on television and social media. Instead, he uncovered a folder stamped "Black Market Clinic" confidential and an envelope stuffed with rubber-stamped invoices for illicit procedures performed off the books. His blood turned to ice when he recognized the clinic address, a warehouse on the outskirts of town, far from the sanitized wards of the hospital. Grace had never been granted operating privileges here. The so-called miracle surgery was a fabrication, a ruse designed to lure wealthy patients into the shadows. And Liam, his own brother-in-law, had unwittingly become the unsuspecting star of the greatest medical fraud Los Angeles had ever seen. Finn's pulse raced as he grabbed his phone to call the one person he trusted with the secret, Steffi. But before he could dial, the intercom crackled. "Code blue, Dr. Buckingham to emergency wing." Grace's voice, composed, almost triumphant, floated through the speakers. Panic and guilt twisted Finn's gut. He knew what that summons meant. With LAPD's Special Fraudulent Operations Unit on high alert for illegal medical activity, Grace's arrest was imminent. He raced toward the emergency entrance, memories of Grace's warm smile during Liam's recovery colliding with the damning evidence he'd uncovered. As he turned the corner, he saw flashing red and blue lights through the glass doors. Uniformed detectives, flanked by LAPD's fraud task force, were ushering Grace through double doors. Her white coat flapped behind her like a fallen banner. Finn caught her eye for just a fraction of a second. There was no defiance there, only a flurry of fear and desperation. He approached as quietly as he could, overhearing a detective's clipped voice. "Dr. Buckingham, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit medical fraud, healthcare fraud, and operating an unlicensed surgical facility. Anything you say can and will be used against you." The following minutes blurred. Finn backed away, his hands trembling, as Grace was handcuffed in the antiseptic hallway that had moments before been a stage for her celebrated feat. He remembered Liam's fragile smile when Grace had told him the surgery was a success. How Liam had clasped Hope's hand and vowed to be strong for baby Beth. Now all that hope threatened to vanish under the crushing weight of scandal. Finn's mind raced with the implications. If Grace's arrest went public, the hospital would face federal investigations, insurance companies would pull out, and Liam's ongoing care would be placed in legal limbo. Even more devastating was the risk to Grace's medical license, and to every life she had sworn to save. The secret black market clinic she'd operated had been bankrolled by an unknown rival of the Forrester empire, a shadowy figure whose ultimate goals remained murky, but whose willingness to exploit human vulnerability was frighteningly clear. With Grace in cuffs, every clandestine surgery, every vulnerable patient lured by promises of breakthrough treatments would come to light. The entire underworld operation would collapse like a house of cards, and with it, the reputation of everyone connected to Grace, including Finn himself, whose own integrity would be called into question for having kept this secret. Inside the ER nurse's station, Finn dialed Hope's number, but her voicemail greeted him. He swallowed hard, then called Steffi, who answered with breathless concern. "What's happening?" she demanded. In hushed tones, Finn relayed the scene. The office files, the warehouse address, the detectives, Grace's arrest. Steffi cursed softly, her heart lurching at the thought of Liam's recovery being derailed. "We have to protect Liam," she said. "And Grace. There has to be a way to keep Liam's care on track and by Grace time." Finn agreed, his mind already mapping out a plan. Enlist Ridge's political connections to delay the indictment, secure emergency federal injunctions to maintain Grace's operating privileges temporarily, and confront the mysterious financier behind the black market clinic before law enforcement could trace the money back to the Forrester name. Moments later, Ridge Forrester bounded into the ER, fresh off a board meeting at Forrester Creations. His tailored suit and polished shoes seemed incongruous in this scene of urgency. "What's going on?" he asked, scanning Finn's ashen face. When Finn explained, Ridge's jaw clenched. "Grace Buckingham? No. She's been a gift to Liam and Hope," he said, glancing toward the doctor's lounge where Hope had rushed to comfort Liam's anxious nurses. Ridge's protective instincts flared. He turned to the detective blocking his path. "Officer, with all respect, Dr. Buckingham is the only doctor Liam trusts. He's stable now, but he'll crash if she's taken away." The detective's face softened for a moment, then steeled. "Sir, I understand your concerns, but we have a warrant. Dr. Buckingham's services are not a question. She's under arrest." Ridge closed his eyes, anger mingling with helplessness. He knew that courts could grant continuances for critical care, but an arrest on federal fraud charges was another matter entirely. Elsewhere in the hospital, Hope's panic reached a fever pitch when she learned of Grace's detainment. She slipped into Liam's private recovery room, where he lay propped up on crisp white pillows, and found him restless, eyes flickering with confusion and pain. "Grace," he whispered, clutching Hope's hand. "Where's Grace?" Hope faltered, then knelt beside him. "She's been called away on an emergency," she improvised, striving to keep her tone calm. But Liam's eyes filled with fear. In that moment, Hope felt her own courage harden. She would do whatever it took to keep Grace at Liam's side and to uncover the truth behind this conspiracy. Across town, in a dimly lit warehouse, the rival benefactor watched the police raid unfold on a tablet, his fingers tapping a polished oak conference table. This unknown adversary had poured millions into Grace's underground clinic, all to destabilize the Forrester HU by entangling their allies in scandal. A few strategic whispers here, a scandalous miracle cure there, and the Forrester empire risked reputational collapse. Yet as Grace was led away in handcuffs, the financier allowed himself a thin smile. The first phase of the plan had succeeded, Grace discredited, Liam's care in jeopardy, the Forresters scrambling to protect their own. Now it was time to accelerate the next phase. Leak evidence of Forrester executives' alleged involvement in black market referrals, throw the company into public relations chaos, and watch their stock plummet. But the benefactor hadn't counted on two things: Finn's relentless loyalty and the unbreakable bond of family. As the warehouse lights flickered off, he realized that in their desperation, the Forresters might yet strike back with more ferocity than he ever anticipated. By late afternoon, the hospital hummed with tension. Word of Grace's arrest had begun to leak to the press, and uniformed officers patrolled the corridors. Liam's doctors whispered behind closed doors about emergency care, while attorneys huddled over laptops, drafting motions and injunctions. Finn paced outside the detective's command post, briefcase in hand, determined to negotiate Grace's release, at least long enough to complete Liam's postoperative treatments. Ridge appeared beside him, phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders to Forrester Creations' legal team. "Get me every scrap of evidence that ties this to the rival's black market clinic. I want financial records, correspondence, anything that implicates them. We'll trade it for Grace's freedom." Finn nodded, relief and apprehension warring in his chest. They had a plan, but whether it would work before Liam's fragile condition collapsed remained to be seen. Meanwhile, Grace sat in an interrogation room, her crisp white coat replaced by a borrowed cardigan. She looked exhausted but resolute as she recounted her side of the story, how she'd been recruited by the mysterious benefactor to perform experimental procedures at the off-site clinic, how she'd believed the treatments were legitimate, how her conscience had finally rebelled when she saw Liam's MRI results. The detective listened, skeptical but intrigued, as Grace divulged the clinic's inner workings. She named surgeons coerced into compliance, pharmaceutical companies complicit in supplying unapproved drugs, and the shell corporations funneling money into the operation. Slowly, the detective's expression shifted from suspicion to dawning horror. If Grace's testimony panned out, she could become a government witness rather than a defendant, and the entire clandestine network would unravel. Back in the ER, Hope leaned against the foot of Liam's bed, her wedding ring catching the harsh hospital light like a beacon of steadfastness. Finn entered, a thin folder under his arm. "Hope," he said softly, "we might have a way to keep Grace working on Liam." He laid out the legal strategy, a temporary restraining order alongside Grace's plea agreement to cooperate fully with the fraud task force. Hope's eyes widened with gratitude and relief. She pressed her hand to Finn's arm. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she turned to look at Liam, still groggy, but with a spark in his eyes now that Grace's presence was secured. As dusk settled over Los Angeles, the forensic glow of crime scene vans and short-lived headlines began to fade. Grace was released on conditional bail to continue Liam's care under supervision, the detectives setting up a joint task force with the DEA and FDA to dismantle the black market clinic. Finn and Ridge, exhausted but triumphant, shared a quiet nod of solidarity. Hope returned to Liam's side, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, her heart full of determination to see him through recovery. And far away, the unknown benefactor realized that in trying to destroy the Forrester legacy, he had inadvertently forged an unbreakable union between families, between lovers, and between doctors and patients bound by loyalty and love. The battlefield may have shifted from the runways of fashion to the halls of justice and healing, but one truth remained undeniable. The bold and the beautiful are at their fiercest when they fight to protect the ones they love. Prepare yourselves for the ultimate Forrester family showdown, because the venerable patriarch Eric Forrester has drawn the line in the sand, and his target is none other than his own son's romantic destiny with Dr. Taylor Hayes. No longer content to offer paternal guidance from the sidelines, Eric has morphed into a master manipulator extraordinaire, actively orchestrating every twist and turn in Ridge's love life to steer him away from Taylor and straight back into the arms of Brooke Logan, whom Eric now proclaims as the one true love of his son's life. The latest move in this high-stakes chess game? A carefully calculated business trip to Italy, specifically Naples and Capri. Designed to envelop Ridge and Brooke in the heady romance of the Mediterranean and give their bridge reunion the perfect backdrop. Eric's machinations are anything but subtle. He's dredged up old photographs of Brooke and Ridge, glimpses of their sunlit laughter and stolen kisses, to remind Ridge of the passion they once shared, all while publicly heralding Brooke as Ridge's destiny. In the wake of Ridge's heartfelt engagement to Taylor, this abrupt demand for an overseas work excursion reeks of manipulation, and Eric's timing couldn't be more suspicious. He's effectively exiled Taylor from her fiancé's side, isolating Ridge with Brooke in a setting that screams nostalgia and rekindled flame. Taylor sees through the ploy, recognizing Eric's tactics to replicate some lost romance of his own. Perhaps the echoes of his past with Beth Henderson, or a final nod to his late wife Stephanie's earlier support of Taylor. Yet, don't forget, Stephanie championed Taylor as the perfect match for Ridge, making Eric's sudden crusade against Taylor an even more scandalous betrayal of his late wife's wishes. As word spreads through the Forrester inner circle, alliances begin to shift. Taylor, engaged and hopeful for a serene future, now finds herself fighting uphill to preserve her relationship with Ridge, facing not only his own wavering heart, but also the formidable will of his father. Ridge, torn between filial duty and the woman he's sworn to marry, stands at a crossroads where every decision carries seismic weight. Fans are buzzing. Will Ridge finally have the courage to defy Eric and honor his promise to Taylor, or will he succumb to the romantic siren call of Italy and the pressure of his family's expectations? The saga has all the hallmarks of a classic bold and the beautiful twist, stormy emotions, decades of history, and the looming possibility of a love triangle reignited under the Tuscan sun. And make no mistake, the dramatic event Bradley Bell teased won't disappoint. Picture a harrowing rescue along the rocky Amalfi Coast, a moment of peril that flips Ridge's world upside down, forcing him to confront his true feelings in the face of mortality. In that instant, will Ridge rediscover the depth of his bond with Brooke, or will the very real threat of loss crystallize his commitment to Taylor? Yet, beneath the sun-drenched cliffs and shimmering sea lies Taylor's quiet resolve. She's endured enough. Widowed twice, trapped and tormented by enemies like Sheila Carter, hospitalized, and left to fight for Ridge's affection whenever his entanglements with Brooke reignited. Now, at last, she holds that ring, and it symbolizes a future Ridge has seemed ready to embrace. How cruel, then, that the man she thought her greatest ally, her fiancé's father, should now be the architect of her undoing. Fans are also whispering about a potential alliance between Taylor and an unlikely partner, Nick Marone, to counter Eric's bridge-building schemes. Could Taylor and Nick join forces to outmaneuver Eric, expose his manipulations, and reclaim Ridge's heart? Imagining Taylor and Nick conspiring behind the scenes adds another layer of intrigue, secret late-night calls, whispered strategies, and the tension of whether Ridge will ever learn that his own father engineered the trip meant to drown his engagement in romance with another woman. This tempest has been brewing for nearly 4 decades. Ridge and Brooke have tied the knot 8 times, while Taylor has been miraculously resurrected from presumed death and wed to Ridge multiple times herself. The pattern is as old as the show's DNA, but industry insiders hint that this time, it may truly be different. The stakes have never been higher, the emotional cost never greater. Eric's intervention has lit a fuse that could either explode the family apart or backfire spectacularly, leaving him isolated as Ridge finally stands up to dictate his own romantic future. Will Ridge at last seize his autonomy, honor his vows to Taylor, and defy the patriarch who raised him? Or will he allow Eric's cinematic ploy, complete with gondola rides, cliffside confessions, and the promise of one last sunrise together, to sweep him off his feet and back into Brooke's waiting arms? Rest assured, whichever path Ridge chooses, the fallout will be earth-shattering. Taylor deserves better than to see her father-in-law pull the strings of her life, but if anyone can outwit Eric at his own game, it's her. As this Italian saga unfolds, one thing remains certain: the Forrester family will never be the same, and Bold and the beautiful viewers are in for the most dramatic, heart-wrenching, and jaw-dropping chapters yet.